On In Good Faith, we believe that all faith traditions have something to teach us about how God is working in the world and in our lives. So join us as we listen and learn and discover how speaking with people of other faiths can strengthen our own faith and even our own practice. Hi, and welcome to In Good Faith. I'm Stephen Cap Perry, and I'm in studio today with our senior producer, Heather Bigley.
Hello.
And we're glad to be speaking with you about In Good Faith. Sort of an interesting episode. We're going to do a retrospective because we've been doing In Good Faith. I started in 2017, and then you arrived.
2022.
And we have just done more and more shows, especially since you arrived and we had more hands on deck and students to help us as well. This has been maybe the favorite professional project of my life. It's at least in the top two, which is the chance to do In Good Faith and to speak to people of all different faiths, not to say, what do Catholics believe? What do Hindus believe? But what is your personal experience? And that has been so enriching to me. And we thought we would maybe just talk through as we reach the end of this arc, which has been In Good Faith. And we have over 330 episodes. And we will keep that online. That's something that can be a resource to people. You may, if you haven't, want to start with episode 1 and then listen all the way through.
And today we're going to do something I've always wanted to do, which I'm going to interview Steve.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so we'll see how Steve does in the hot seat. But as Steve said, In Good Faith is ending. It's hard to say. We can barely believe it ourselves. But we'll be moving on to other projects that we're excited to share with you guys.
Yeah, we hope you'll stay subscribed because this is the channel where we will let you know what's coming next.
Yeah. So let's start at the very beginning.
A very good place to start.
Yes. I've heard the story of how In Good Faith got started, but I'd love for you to share with the listeners, what was the inspiration behind In Good Faith and why did you decide, we should really be doing something like this?
I'd love to give credit to Marcus Smith. He is the host of Constant Wonder podcast here at BYU Broadcasting. And he had been thinking of this show, and suddenly the time seemed right. And he called me in one day, and he said, I have a title, In Good Faith. And I said, I love that. I love that. He said, what does it suggest to you? I thought, it suggests honesty, openness, acceptance. And he said, yes, I think that's where we want to go with listening what he called hospitably to people like, you're a guest in our home. I would like to speak to you about your faith experience individually, not necessarily how it might be even for your spouse or your child or your other relative. And I think that's been kind of the spark that has kept us going, is that there are always new people who have their own personal experiences with God.
Yeah.
With the divine.
I think something important that you said earlier was it's not necessarily about asking Catholics what they believe. You know, if we just wanted to talk to a Catholic and then turn and talk to a Jewish person, we might do that. But instead, we're interested in all the different experiences that different Catholic people might have or different Jewish people might have, and recognizing that those religions aren't monoliths, right? They're not just one. Everybody feels the same and thinks the same and has the same kind of experience. And in doing that for other religions, I think we're inviting people to do that for us as well.
Yeah, I would say that one of my favorite things about doing In Good Faith is that it has given our listeners and me more insight into that I can't paint any one denomination or tradition with a broad brush and say, now I know what Muslims are like.
Right.
Because I just absolutely don't. Because the ones we've met from Turkey or as they've come to the U.S. and are establishing their own way of being Muslims here in the U.S., different from wherever their ancestors came from. That's just one example of people having very different personal experiences.
Yeah. So, Steve, you've worked as a playwright, a writer for television, children's media, you've composed music. How does that storytelling background play into what you want to accomplish with In Good Faith?
I think all of those things, as I've thought about it, are about communicating something meaningful. Like I find something or have a thought or hear something, and I want to sort of package that in a way I can share it with people. That's just kind of an impulse I've always had. And you might say that being a songwriter or being a radio host or writing a script are very different things. But for me, it's all communicating something important and meaningful. And I've been really lucky to always, with the exception of one or two jobs I had very briefly, have a sense of mission about what I'm doing. That has been so important to me. And with In Good Faith, just like songs I wrote or scripts I wrote, I have a real sense there is something important we're doing here, something meaningful.
I have to say, I've felt like storytelling, for most of us, we might not refer to it as storytelling, but I think for most of us, there are important stories that we learn how to tell about how our relationship with God evolved, right?
Yeah.
You know, I work with local women's leadership for my congregation, and one of the things that is really important is in our women's meetings is just giving people the opportunity to share a story about something important in their life as it connects to God. And when they're sharing stories, that's when they start to, as we say in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, bear their testimony, right?
Yeah.
And I think letting people share their story lets them share their witness of how the divine is working in their life.
Especially if they can share it in an environment where they're being heard and no one's saying, oh, I disagree with that, or, oh, you totally misunderstood. God doesn't work that way.
Right. Yeah, being able to say to someone, that's really beautiful, and I'm honored and privileged that you shared it with me.
Yeah.
Instead of those other reactions that you've talked about.
Well, starting from our very first episode, we spoke with a wonderful guest, and she is Catholic, and she's named for a particular saint. And at the end of this interview, I said, do you have like a patron saint or a saint that you feel close to? And she had a couple, but one was her namesake, Saint Juliana. And she sort of paused for a minute, like, am I going to say this? And then she shared this experience of actually being, I think she was in Rome and in St. Peter's, and she was walking along and just kind of thinking about the experiences she was having. And she said, suddenly I felt like someone was looking to me or looking at me. And so she turned around and there was a statue of St. Juliana.
Oh.
And it was just this connection that she's never forgotten. Now, what do I do as a listener? In good faith means I'm going to assume that they are telling me an honest story. I was actually quite moved by that story because why not? That particular saint reached out to her or in some way, or the Holy Spirit reached out and said, you're being watched over.
Right.
And so I love hearing people's experiences that they do have to be vulnerable enough to share and then just accepting them. And you really can't argue with someone's experience. You could argue about what does this Greek word mean that represents the Aramaic and are we doing this right? You can argue about that. You cannot argue, I think, sincerely about people's personal experiences.
If you want them to take your personal experiences seriously.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good corollary.
That's the reciprocal there that's acting. So there's a question I wanted to ask. You center the show around lived experience rather than theology. We're already getting into that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's more to add, but the question is, why are personal stories such a powerful way to talk about faith? And one of them is what you said, like no one can argue with you. But I don't know that's necessarily what we're thinking about when we're constructing the stories in our brains, right, of the thing that happened.
Yeah. And I think I also hear, because I have my own ways that I feel I communicate with God or am in touch with the divine. I have other ways that I wish I were.
Right.
And to hear other people working through that, and especially to hear some of them with these remarkable experiences. And yes, I wish I would have that. I can't really be jealous. I can just be happy that happened. And I truly come to see that God is working in people's lives. I mean, we say that at the beginning of the show, that God is working in the world and in our lives. And people's personal experiences show me how that could work or can work and has worked for different people. It lets me know that God's working in my life too, even if it's not immediately apparent.
I want to go back to this idea about theology because we do talk about theology. And when I first started working on this show, I was introduced to a term that I'd never heard before, which was holy envy.
Yes.
And I actually think that holy envy and learning about other people's theology is kind of a wonderful experience to have. So For those of you just joining us, Steve's going to define holy envy.
And this comes from Krister Stendahl, who was a Lutheran bishop who taught, I believe it was Harvard Divinity School. But he had his rules for interfaith engagement, 3 or 4 things. One, don't compare your best with their worst and things like that. But the one that seems to really ignite people's imagination is the idea of holy envy, that you leave room to hear something in someone else's tradition and think, I love that. In fact, I kind of wish that was part of my tradition.
Can you think of any examples of holy envy that you've had?
Yeah. In fact, some of them have actually influenced the way I think of my own faith. For instance, I was at an Episcopal service, and this particular congregation, they said we have open communion, so any who are believers in Christ, please feel welcome from whatever denomination. And I thought, well, that's me. And so I thought, do I want to? Yes, I want to do this. And so I went up, I knelt at the railing, and as the priest came along with the bread, or the host in this case, and said, the body of Christ given for you. And then came along with, in this case it was grape juice or wine. I had the grape juice because of my beliefs, but the blood of Christ given for you. It was spoken very softly and only to me in a way that was so personal and so moving to me that I thought, I want to feel this when I have communion every Sunday in my own congregation. We do it a little differently. There are people assigned to sort of bring it out and share it as we sit in our pews. But I have begun, every time I take that piece of bread, in my mind, I say, and I remember that experience, the body of Christ given for me. And my whole experience every Sunday since that Sunday has benefited from that little bit of holy envy, that it was done in such a one-to-one personal way that I wish we had.
Yeah.
But I can personally do that and choose to do it, and I do.
Yeah. That's really beautiful. Speaking of Episcopalians, my holy envy moment I've had several, but last year I took the opportunity to attend a Holy Thursday service at St. Mary's Episcopal, and I'd never really engaged in that kind of liturgical experience before. And, we sang, the priest sang, there was lighting of candles, there was all this stuff. And to be honest, I could have used like a tight 45. It could have been like, it went on for about an hour and a half. And there came a point on that wooden bench where I thought, oh boy, I'm ancient of days. But I was just so touched by the beauty of the experience. And I thought, these people have brought this reverence and this expectation to this ritual. And I could do with a little bit more of that on my end, thinking of the rituals in my own faith tradition and bring that kind of expectation of goodness, that there's something here for me, as opposed to, oh, we do this all the time. Yeah. Right? And perhaps it was that extensive liturgy. It might have just been, this is new, and I don't know quite what's going to happen next. And maybe if I brought that kind of curiosity and excitement to my own, congregation, I'd, light up just a little bit more.
I think I let go of something that I don't know if I was taught, but I absorbed as a child. So in my tradition, we have very stark, very plain, very simple services. It's mostly people get up and speak extemporaneously, except for just a few moments like the prayer for communion. But there generally aren't any paintings or anything. And so in my mind, I was thinking, well, if this is good, and it seems good, then the other ways that people do things must be bad.
Right, yeah.
And so to go to a place where they're swinging the censer and there's incense, where there are adornments on all of the walls, I just thought, this must be over the top. We don't need this. But as I've spoken, for instance, up at one of the Greek Orthodox churches in Salt Lake City, and I talked to 2 of the priests there, and they said, yes, let's do the interview in the church, which I thought was lovely. And they said, let's come up on the platform.
Oh.
And I said, really? We don't need to? And they said, no, let's do. So we set our 3 chairs there and set microphones. And then as they were describing, and it's not just random decoration like a Baroque ballroom. These are scriptural pictures. Here's Jesus coming out of the tomb. Here is the leper being healed, whatever it might be. And they were talking about involving all of the senses. So here's something to see and look at. Here's beautiful music to hear. Here is the incense that represents prayers rising to God. And we smell that, we take that in. And it totally opened my mind and really my heart to saying, this is just a different way of coming to God.
Yeah.
And I can love that and sometimes have some holy envy for involving all of those senses in a way that can really draw you into the experience.
That's lovely. And I think, you talk a little bit about, going and interviewing all these people, but even before you were doing all these interviews, you were a tour guide.
Yes.
So, which is, I think, the most interesting thing, not the most interesting thing, but one of the many interesting things I learned about Steve when I was working with him is he's a tour guide. So how do you think being a tour guide has also sort of shaped the tone of the show and shaped how you approach people?
Yeah, that's really interesting. As a tour guide, I have been a guide to religious sites, specifically, mostly, in fact. Sometimes secular sites, places in Europe and such, but often the religious sites. And so I think what I draw from that is taking people to a place where they have maybe dreamed of going, or they've read about in their scriptures, and they have this expectation, they have this hope for an experience. And it can be really disappointing, for instance, if you go to some sacred site and you think, oh, well, here I am. Next. And so to be able to explain not only here we are at this site that people venerate, take 5 minutes, take a picture, to tell the story of the place. Why is this meaningful to people? You see people all around you coming here, and they're not on a tour. They're coming here to venerate the place or to contemplate. And to be able to set up an experience where people can find meaning is really beautiful. And sometimes people will go to the place they've always dreamed of going, Bethlehem, for instance. And one part of that may be like, oh, it's a little anticlimactic. It was just a cave.
Yeah.
And yet they'll be totally surprised. They're at the Jordan River and they just thought, oh, we're stopping at a possible baptismal site. Okay. And then they have this incredible spiritual experience because they see people who have come from all over the world, all dressed in white, gathered to sing with guitars if they're a Latin American company, with drums if they're from an African group who's traveling together on a pilgrimage. And then as they all go in the water to be baptized or rebaptized. And so unexpected places. So In Good Faith is really, in some ways, a way to be a tour guide and invite people to places and experiences they haven't been and hopefully find meaning in those.
I like that. All right. Well, the show, we've worked hard to bring in guests from every different spiritual and cultural tradition. And you told me about, before I arrived, you would have like pictures of people up on your wall. So you would know like, oh, I've done a Catholic man and maybe it's time for, right? It's just trying to kind of mix up the diversity and be aware, right, of who you've interviewed and who you haven't interviewed. It took us a while to get a Zoroastrian, but we got one.
We got from African Episcopal, Methodist Episcopal, clear to Z, Zoroastrian.
So how do you prepare to interview someone from a faith who's not of your faith?
Some of those ways would be obvious. Google.
Yeah.
But then whenever possible, and the most important to me has been to actually go to a service. Like I show up at a synagogue and I call ahead and I say, here's what I do, but I would like to come worship with you. I'm not so much here just to spy on you, be an observer, but I'm a believer and I would like to come worship with you and then speak to you or someone from your congregation at a later point. And so to actually go, and sometimes multiple times, you build trust as they see that you are there being respectful and that you are seeing why they find this to be meaningful. You just cannot be going to somebody's place of worship, and it eliminates fear. And I don't know why there is fear built up connected with religion. We think our salvation is so important, or whatever we go to next is so important that, of course, everything hinges on this moment. I've got to do it right, not wrong. I think I'm right, so those people must be wrong, as I said before. But to let go of some of that and think, let God speak to me. Now, I have to say, I started off with an advantage. The church that I belong to has, from its founding in the 1830s, had said, not only will we defend the right for a Methodist or a Baptist or a Mohammedan, as they said back then, a Muslim, to believe as they believe and to worship God as they wish to worship, but that we accept anything that is true, to seek all truth. Now, my personal opinion is that God has been scattering wisdom throughout the world over the centuries.
God speaks to the seeker.
Yes.
No matter where they are.
Yeah. And so if I ignore what the people who are Hindus or Buddhists have learned, I'm missing a little part of what God has had to teach humanity, my brothers and my sisters. And so I have loved sort of opening my hands to say, I have a few pieces of this puzzle, but I am realizing they weren't the entire picture. Share with me your pieces. And I love how in my own spiritual life, those little pieces have sort of connected and helped me see a picture that has actually made me trust God more in my own life.
Yeah. I've said to people multiple times, coming to work at In Good Faith has been incredibly healing for me because just hearing people talk about how God is working in their lives makes me feel like, oh yeah, he's everywhere. He loves all of us.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful thing to know and come to know. So let's build on that a little bit, because it's not just that you do these things, but you actually have started speaking at different conferences to help other people know how to do these things. So what are some principles that you sort of think of as like surefire method to talk to people about their religion in such a way that they don't feel like they're being cross-examined.
Yeah.
They don't feel like they're being treated with suspicion. And you yourself feel like you can bring your whole person to that conversation. So what are some of those principles?
One is, if you have a local interfaith organization, check it out. Be part of it. Because what you'll find is that it's not everyone deciding, let's not talk about anything that could divide us. It is people bringing their whole selves. But the understanding is we are meeting together to see what we can accomplish that's good in our community. Maybe a specific problem we could address, but also just knowing each other. And I know that you are not here to convert me. And you know that I'm not here to convert you. And the people who have the most interfaith experience, in my own observation, is the people who are the most secure. They've become very secure.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people start off, they think, oh, will I be drawn into some, I don't know, heretical thought or belief? Instead, you find your own faith strengthened and you find respect for other people. So that's one, is get involved. Go to things. Be where the people who are believers are. Another one is, and Laurie Patton from Middlebury College said this, find a third thing. And she shares an experience of some Iraqi refugees who were Muslim, and here in the States, a group of mostly Christians. And they were trying to have this dialogue. They finally realized it was not going well. So they called her and said, what should we do? And she said, find the third thing. And what that means is both of these groups were farmers in desert environments. And it was like, let's talk about irrigation.
Right.
Suddenly, they're jumping up and having these conversations and getting to know one another, and it wasn't comparative religion class. It was, here's what we do in our community, and we have water issues, and we're trying to do a good job growing our crops. And what do you know that you brought with you from the desert of Iraq? What could we share with you about things we've learned here in the American West? And so finding a third thing. Almost every faith has a call to help people who are hungry, who are homeless, or need clothes. That's a thing you can do as a third thing. And really partner together. So that's, I think, one other way.
Yeah.
And maybe the most fun, invite them to dinner at your house. Now, so if I invite Jewish people to my house, I have to think, now wait, they have dietary restrictions. Okay, we're not doing bacon bits in the salad. And you would be surprised, the interfaith dinners sometimes were the first ones have awkward moments of, there's no pork here, about these bacon bits in the salad, you know? Yes. And so then you ask your friends, here's what we were thinking. Does this work with, and is it prepared in a certain way, or does it need to be kosher or halal? And then if they ask me, they would say, so if you're not having coffee or tea, if we're not serving wine, what would you drink?
Yeah.
So just by having a dinner, you respect each other's dietary guidelines. Or if I have someone over who's Hindu, I would have some good vegetarian options.
Yeah.
And so that's as simple as let's sit down and eat together, which is the most basic human thing. And that can be a learning and even a bonding experience. And you say, would you make one of your favorite dishes and bring it and tell us about it? And I'll do one of ours, that kind of thing.
Right. I think those are all really good principles, and I love that. I'm trying to think if there are any others that I've learned. So you went over doing a little research, showing up at their place of worship, inviting them to talk about something that's not religion.
Yeah, a project, a thing we can do jointly.
Solve a problem together. You talked about eating together. I like all of those things. Are there any others that we can add to that list? I don't know what you say in your big conference.
Well, a lot of times I'm telling stories of what people have taught me.
Okay.
And so just knowing that, first of all, you have stuff to learn is important. Right at the beginning of this In Good Faith project, I talked to Rabbi Sam Spector. He had only been here less than 6 months, I think, as a new rabbi for a congregation in Salt Lake. And he's talking and he says, because each person is created by God in the image of God, for me not to recognize holiness or divinity in them, to him, he said, was blasphemy. Not just careless or thoughtless, but like really bad not to recognize the actual presence of God. Well, obviously that stuck with me over 7 years. And that's another thing, is to see the divinity and how God is working in their lives and through them, even if it's not the way that you had expected. This is In Good Faith, and we're doing a retrospective. We'll be back in a moment with some more.
You know, there are no perfect people, and there are no perfect families, and no perfect relationships. So how do we be good people and have good relationships and good families? How do we do better at what is most important to us? I'm here to tell you about The Lisa Show, another in the family of BYU Radio podcasts. Lisa Valentine Clark is a comedian, a believer, a single mother. She delves into the challenges and the relationships that shape all of our lives, whether we're talking about parenting, mental health questions, social issues, being a caregiver. She and her council of moms tackle the topic. Yes, you'll hear from experts, but you'll also hear from the people who have been digging the trenches. She'll help you figure out this thing called life, with lots of laughs along the way. It's The Lisa Show. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to In Good Faith. Usually this is the exciting moment where we come back and I ask the guest one more question, but Heather is asking me all the questions today.
And then talking plenty on my own. Don't you worry about that.
Which is great.
Okay, so I think my first year working here, I felt like there were so many guests where I was like, oh my gosh, I learned so much. Or I would just be like crying in the in the control room. But I want to ask you, Steve, is there a guest or an interview that you had that really changed the way you saw your tradition, you saw that person's tradition, or just made a big impact for you?
Yeah. I mean, if I had a whole list.
Have a list. You can have a list.
In front of me. But some who come to mind, Ravi Gupta, a Hindu scholar. He's currently at Utah State University. He came down twice. Once he talked to us about the Bhagavad Gita for a book club. And he was so kind to let us read his scripture and say what we got. And then he explained what was really going on, which was very patient and kind of him. But the first time I talked to him, I said, as you read the Vedas and the Upanishads, so these Hindu scriptures, and there are so many, do the adherents believe that these things actually are historical fact? And he looked sort of puzzled, like, well, that's not really the point. Like he said, maybe, because the universe ends and then starts over again. He said, in one of the endless universes, yeah, probably all of this stuff happened or something like it.
Right.
But we don't think of it that way. And I realized as he explained, he didn't even think of time the way I thought of. And I thought, well, God, as I understand God, exists outside of time. I thought, I need to listen to this Hindu man explaining to me a little bit better understanding, closer to what God may be living in. And I thought, this is important for me to know. And there are times when perhaps it is really important, did this exact thing happen or not, in the way it's described, coming down to us through thousands of years. But what am I getting from it? Or what is what I call the Spirit speaking to me and saying, here is something you can glean from this. So he kind of changed my thought even about the concept of time. And then it was so simple. She was in the military, Greta.
Oh, this was just this year.
Yeah, and she took care of her mother who had Alzheimer's, which she thought was just going to just shut down her life and limit her. Instead, it became this kind of a gift, a spiritual gift. But Greta was talking, as I said, when did you first learn about God? And she talked about being a little girl swinging on a swing set and having conversations with God. And I thought, how did you know to do that? It was just a given that God was hearing her and that God was responding. And that's how she lived her whole life. She said, I never stop. It's an ongoing conversation. I mean, I write on my calendar. I don't literally write on my calendar, remember to pray. But I have spontaneous moments where I'm worried about something or just really grateful for something. But I've always had a real traditional, like morning prayer, evening prayer. And that still happens mostly, but I don't worry if it doesn't because I'm trying to be more in the presence of God all the time.
Yeah.
And I thought, how cool that she had that experience as a little girl.
Yeah.
I wish I'd been smarter or more open as a kid to have started that kind of an ongoing dialogue.
So one of the recent episodes we had was about OCD. And when everyone pitched, like, we should cover mental illness, we should cover these things, I've, of course, have struggled with anxiety and depression like most of America. And I've been to therapy, and we were going to talk to this woman about OCD. We met her in Atlanta. It was very fortuitous for us. But I didn't really think, that's going to be an episode for me until I heard the interview. And then I was like, her discussion of how sometimes her brain fills her with so much fear and she's trying to solve all the problems. And that's not how the Spirit talks to us. And that's not how God wants us to feel. And I literally had this relief in my chest and also this experience of, if I'd known this when I was 14... And we've had so many listeners reach out and say, thank you so much for that episode, right? And again, just being able to say to myself, God doesn't want me to feel all wound up and tight inside. He doesn't want me to feel constantly judged and that I have to save and solve all the problems. He wants me to feel love and guidance and, He wants me to be accountable. He wants me to do good things. He wants me to take care, but he wants me to feel his love. And that's been so important to me.
Now, see, along the way, somebody said those words to you in your own tradition, but they didn't hit the same way.
Right.
It's sort of like if you sing a familiar hymn text, but to new music. It's like, wait, this is a whole new thing. I've had not that exact experience, but people saying to me things that suddenly made sense to me. And I thought, I'm sure I've heard this.
Right.
But either I wasn't ready or they said it in the way that reached me.
Right. Well, you're also a dad, and watching your teenagers hear someone say something to them that you've repeated 1,700 times.
Yeah, and they come home and tell you, I learned this thing, and you're like biting your lip. I'm so happy you learned that thing. What a cool concept.
That I have been talking about for 5 years. Okay, so I just mentioned we had a bunch of listeners about that particular episode about scrupulosity, but what are people's responses to the show?
Two come to mind, just right off. One is a person who had been very afraid of Muslims since 9/11.
Yeah.
2001. That's a long time to be afraid of other people. And she was shopping in Nordstrom's, and there was a woman with a hijab at the checkout counter, and she was deathly afraid and left the store. Later, she heard one of our episodes talking to a Muslim woman who was talking about her children and her hopes and her fears and how she prayed to God for them and how sometimes prayers seemed answered. Others, she thought, why isn't there any answer? But then things worked out later even better. The timing was, learning to trust God's timing. And this woman told me, I just didn't know that they think about and worry about the same things we do. She said, that makes no sense, but I just thought they were different. And they're just people. So she said the next time she went in the store, that woman was there, and she went up and started a conversation and just said, I'm glad you're here. And I thought, wow, all she had to do was hear another mother share her hopes and her fears as related to her faith. And suddenly she felt like we're the same.
Yeah.
So that was one. Another one was someone who wrote in and said, I love listening because I love knowing that God is working in people's lives, other people's lives, all around the world. And my feeling also, sometimes as I'm preparing for an interview, I'm a little nervous because I want it to go well. I think it's the nerves that mean I care. I want it to go well, I'm preparing, but then you start in and you're speaking with someone who's very genuine and you sort of relax. I often forget we're on a show. We're just having a conversation about my favorite topics. And so I come out of those almost floating, just like I feel like the Spirit was here, and we could have been Zoroastrian or Hindu or Baha'i or any of the number of Christian denominations around the world. It's that same elevated something that I get from speaking with people who are about the things of God. And I feel better about and have more hope for the world, because if I only listen to the news.
Well, and Steve, you're so warm-hearted. I've heard you say so many times, I've met so many friends while I've been doing this show. And in my very cynical, critical mind, I'm always like, you talk to them for an hour. How are they your friends? And then I'm like, oh, but that's what this experience is about. This experience is about connection and learning from each other with respect. And then hopefully there's some joy, right? And if that's not the basis of a friendship, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and you're connecting on what I would call, if you're both open to it, a real heart level that you may not have quite connected with people you call your friends in that same way. They may be a little more acquaintance than friend. And even, I've told this story before, but I was in Boston. I have a son who lives there, and I walked into the cathedral there, and I just started chatting with someone who turned out to be a deacon. And I said, can I interview you? Here's what we do. And he said, well, I'm free at this time. And so we had this interview. We got to know each other for approximately 30 minutes. Deacon Bob Greiner. And then years later, my son was in the hospital, and they didn't know what he had. He was unconscious. And I was trying to get out there. And so I just posted a call for prayers for those who felt comfortable. And immediately he said, I am here at the hospital checking on your son. Is it okay if I go in and pray with him? Because they would let clergy in. And I said, absolutely, please go, please pray out loud so maybe he'll hear you, tell him we're coming. And yeah, we became friends in those 30 minutes to the point where, and this tells more about who he is, that the minute he heard that, he thought, I'm clergy, they'll let me in, I'll go so he won't be alone. And that was just beautiful and moving to me.
Yes. I'm moved right now.
Me too.
Hearing the story. Yeah, I think that's just gorgeous, like the relationships that get founded. And the point of us talking about it is not to say, and that's what happened in the studio for In Good Faith. Our point is this can happen in your life, right? That our listeners can reach out to the people around them, their neighbors, or someone that's working at the same, service activity as they are, or someone in your office, and you can have a similar experience of getting to know each other in a way that truly matters.
Yeah. First season, Preeta Lal, who is a Hindu, and she goes to the local Krishna temple for the Hare Krishnas. And we kind of hit it off too on kind of a soul level. And then on January 1st, and anyone can join me if they want, there's 108 beads on a prayer. I mean, it looks like a necklace, but it's like the equivalent of a rosary. And you chant the Hare Krishna chant, the names of God, and you do all 107. And you might do several rounds of that. So I started on January 1st, everyone's sleeping in from, I go to bed now early on New Year's Eve. But I go New Year's morning to the Krishna temple, And they have those beads. I bought some, so now I have my own. But they have them there for you, and you take them, and you can just go sit, and you can do that. And as you're doing the chanting, think about the year or whatever. So almost every year, we tend to overlap. Her husband, her daughter are there. And we just sort of look at each other. I'm sitting on one carpet over here, they're on another carpet over there. And, sometimes they're already there. And when I arrive, I don't want to disturb them. But we just sort of see each other there and have this understanding of that spiritual things are important to us both. And it's beyond any one denomination or tradition. And I would say, 75% of the time we overlap a little bit that morning. And it's just fun to say hello, have some hugs, and just know there are other people of other faiths wanting to do and be good. Thank you for tuning in to In Good Faith. I'm Stephen Cap Perry, and we'll be back with more in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Stephen Cap Perry, host of In Good Faith. Nothing captivates me more than people setting out on an adventure, especially if it's a place I wish I could go to or a subject I wish I knew more about, but I don't live in the right place or I don't have the equipment or the expertise. I'm telling you about a podcast from our BYU Radio family of podcasts, an award-winning podcast called Constant Wonder. With host Marcus Smith, you'll be expanding your horizons on all kinds of discovery. It could be science, it could be art, history, and more. Do you need that feeling of awe and wonder in your life more? I do, and I love it when I see how to experience that by hearing the stories of people who are doing and exploring all of those things that are so interesting to me. Check out the podcast, Constant Wonder.
Welcome back to In Good Faith. We're doing a retrospective, not just of this year, but of all of In Good Faith since the first episode back in 2017. We are coming to the end of the cycle. Don't worry, we will be working on new and what we hope will be inspiring projects. So do stay subscribed, because this is the channel where we'll tell you what's coming up next, a variety of things. But we are sort of turning tables, and Heather's been interviewing me about In Good Faith.
Yay! Okay, so when I first started working here and I started being the scheduler, I'm going to reach out to someone, I've invited them on the show, and then here are a few questions we'll ask you. And Steve had a list of 25 questions.
Oh, yeah.
And his method was to send the 25 and to say, we'll talk about some of these, we won't talk about all of these. I had a funny experience where I was inviting someone on the show and I ended up doing the interview, and she was so nervous because she said, I tried to answer all 25 of those to prep for this. And I was like, oh no, that's not exactly what we wanted you to do. So what we ended up doing is we'd pick like 3 or 4 of those questions that we thought would be appropriate for that guest, and those would get sent out. All of that to say, what are some of your favorite questions to ask someone?
Yeah. Well, there's the one that has become sort of traditional, which is at the end. We prepare as best we can, but we might not always get to something that's really important to the guest. So I usually ask, what should I ask you that I don't know to ask you? Yeah. Like if we knew each other better, if I was part of your community, what might I ask? And very often they'll say, oh, well, I don't know, not really anything except, and then they'll deliver this beautiful thought that they've been carrying around, or something that for sure I should have asked, but I didn't know to. And so that's one I always like. It's a little bit of a, have we missed something that you're going to walk away thinking, I wish I had gotten to share this. That's a chance to do that. Another question that I really like, and maybe you're the one who phrased it this way, and I just sort of latched onto it, is what practice or teaching or concept in your faith connects you to the divine? And that's just open enough. And sometimes I'll say, what about your faith life brings you joy?
Yeah.
Now that's a place where I see people pause, and then usually a smile comes across their face as they say, oh, when we do this for Christmas, or just knowing whatever it might be.
I think that is such an important question. And I think it's an important question to ask certain people. I think in American culture, we do not associate Islam with joy. And so to ask that to a Muslim guest and to see them go, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I get to talk about what keeps me, going, instead of having to say, well, Muslims do this or Muslims don't do this or the Quran's, it gets us away from this really legalistic understanding of someone's religious tradition and dives into like why they keep going to church or why they keep.
Because you could just go to all the check boxes. Have you prayed 5 times a day? Whatever it might be.
Right.
And I think it's a human nature thing. We like to make checklists to be sure we're ticking off the boxes. But yeah, that gets right to the heart of what keeps them coming back.
Right. I love that question.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. You love to ask, were you raised in a family of, how do you say it?
A family of faith, a household of faith.
Household of faith. And I love the question, what do you know now about God that you didn't know when you were younger? I think that's such a fantastic question. And I'm sorry to friends and family who have been subjected to in good faith questions when I'm like, I just want to connect a little bit better to this person, and I don't actually know this about them. So I'm going to ask them a few Steve questions just to get our conversation going. So you're out there, you know who you are.
Yeah. If someone has especially lived a long enough life, then you can say, what do you know now about God that you didn't?
Or not even a super long life. I think when you're 30, you know some things that you didn't know when you were 15, right? One of my favorite interviews, and this was early on in my tenure here, was with Brian McLaren. We talked to him about his book, Faith After Doubt. And I mean, first of all, he is such a warm, generous person, right?
Yes.
And just lovely. And him, just understanding these ideas of like, when we're young, our brains aren't fully formed. Religion looks like this to us, and that's good, and that's fine. But when we're at other stages in our life, our brains are bigger, our experiences are more manifold, and so religion comes to mean different things. And it's okay that it doesn't mean the same thing it meant when you were 8.
And not to panic. Have I lost my faith? No, it's probably expanding.
Yeah. And when you were 20, you had certain things were very important to you that now you might have let go of because other things about your relationship with God are important. Like that has been a literal lifesaver for me, thinking about the idea that, it's okay that I'm not the same person, so my relationship with God wouldn't be the same.
And to be a little less worried about people who are in one of those other stages than you are.
Oh, yeah. That's the hard part.
And not think, they're not very evolved. It's like the point isn't that they're of ascending goodness and quality, but just they are different ways. And we tend to move in certain directions. And some people go all the way to what he calls stage 4 or harmony. That's an episode people should listen to.
You should go listen to that. Okay, so In Good Faith is ending, but, we have this great archive. What do you hope people listening, not just to this episode, but to In Good Faith generally, what do you hope they take away?
I hope as people listen, they will, and maybe they already believe this, because you might tend to be interested in these matters to even listen to In Good Faith.
Yes.
But that there is more to this life and to this world than meets the eye. Along with that, there are things that are beyond us and sometimes surprising things within us, if we listen, that inspire us, that can guide us. And hearing other people kind of come awake to their relationship with God as they describe it often gives me a list of possibilities. Like, my life could be like that, or in my own way, in my own circle. And as we say in our tagline, God really is working in the world and in our lives. Sometimes we wish it would be like, could we turn up the volume on that, please, because of these various problems and all of that. But just hearing how people get through difficult things, for instance. Some people have difficult things and think, there could not possibly be a God because of what I went through, or this innocent person I know went through. I have to say that's a valid way to think of things. I know other people who will have that same experience, know that same person, and somehow have leaned on their relationship with the divine to get through or to cope. That's been the case with me, where I feel like I've been able to give some things to God that I could not carry on my own, for other people specifically, that were, in a way, just so painful that I thought, how can I continue to live my life knowing this has happened? And yet we all have to continue living. I mean, we generally do continue living our lives. How to do that? And for me, a relationship with God has been absolutely critical and has just only built my trust. And then over time, I've also seen what I would describe as God working in the lives of those people and supporting them, some who feel that and others who are unaware of that.
Right. I think one of the things I hope people understand, and it's something that I continue to understand, is that everybody has a spiritual life. And to continue to ask people about that, or to start asking people about that, is one way that you can grow your relationship. Even the people that you think, oh, they're agnostic, or whatever label they've assigned to themselves or you've assigned to them, they still want to connect with what's important. And they still want to connect with something that's bigger than themselves. And so you can ask about that in a really open, warm way. And once they figure out that you're not attacking them or that you're not trying to trap them into something, once you establish that you are sincere, you can it will just deepen the relationship you have with them.
You just said something really important, that to be part of something bigger than yourself. That's really important. And that could be being a caregiver. That could be contributing in a community organization, whatever it might be, a book drive or clothing drive, food drive. But we've often asked our guests, why is your religious community, how does that benefit you?
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that has also come out that I think people will get, is that having a congregation, usually the people you didn't choose, you could, if you went to every congregation, you could do some shopping around, I suppose.
Yes.
But generally, you didn't choose everyone you go to church with or go to synagogue with, or in fact, you might choose not to with some of them, or you might think we have zero in common, yet here we are. I think that's really important for the good of the world, that we learn how to make space for people who aren't the people we would naturally hang out with, and to learn to see them as divine beings, as creations of God, and who have totally different hobbies and all of that. So I think also that it can be really important to have a religious community.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this episode with me. I just want to mention for our listeners, it still exists. In Good Faith is still available anywhere you get your podcasts. You can still recommend it to folks. You can go back and start it episode 1, and we'd love for you to think of In Good Faith as a helpful archive, if you will.
We are so grateful for the people who have been listening over the years to In Good Faith, and we love the feedback that we've gotten. We always wish there was more to tell us what people want to hear more of, or what inspired people, or maybe people who would say, do you have to always adjust your glasses, or whatever it might be. It's all helpful. And we have been so pleased that from the very beginning, it's always been a pattern of growth, that there are more people discovering, and we just hope that will spill out into the lives of all of our listeners, that you will feel comfortable reaching out and feeling like, okay, I know a little bit about Hindus, I know a little bit about, and if you've got a friend, why not go up to him and say, I listened to this podcast with a person who is Hindu, and they said this, and I'm curious what you think about that. And saying, I am curious, lets people know it's not an attack, it's not an I gotcha. It's an opportunity to, I would really like to know. And I think people are delighted in that circumstance. So I hope you'll continue your own interfaith life and let In Good Faith be a resource. Our production team includes Heather Bigley, Heidi Clough, Nick Levitt, and Ocean Marshall. Our post-production sound designer is Gabriel Haro. In Good Faith is committed to the idea that we all benefit from hearing people of widely varying backgrounds share their personal experience with faith and belief. In fact, we think people with such experience deserve some of our best listening. Check out more of our episodes and extended interviews on our YouTube channel, and connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at In Good Faith Podcast. In Good Faith is a production of BYU Radio. I'm Stephen Kapp Perry.